1880, Africa was a largely unexplored continent. In theory, the Ottoman Empire ruled from Egypt to Tunisia. 3 European powers were implanted on the African coasts: France in Algeria, Senegal, and Gabon, the United Kingdom in the Gulf of Guinea and in South Africa, Portugal in Angola and in Mozambique. In 1914, Africa was almost entirely subject to colonial rule. Only 2 territories had escaped becoming trust territories of a European power: Liberia, founded in 1847 by former slaves returned from the United States, and Ethiopia, the Kingdom of the Negus. 7 European countries had divided up the continent, the 2 main ones being France and the United Kingdom. Africa had thus become, from the 1880s, a favorite region for colonialization. Colorful expressions appeared to describe the race for the unclaimed territory. An irresistible movement is driving the great nations toward the conquest of new lands, as Jules Ferry put it. Gathered together in Berlin from November 1884 to February 1885, the European powers tried to reach agreement on the rules for competition. The Berlin Conference therefore requested the great powers to divide up Africa while avoiding conflict between them. Thus, in 1890, the United Kingdom recognized France's rights to Madagascar. In exchange, Paris recognized London's rights to Zanzibar. This agreement put an end to the long Franco-British rivalry for the island that France had annexed in 1895. Madagascar became a colony, and General Gallieni, governor from 1896 to 1905, assisted in particular by Lyautey, managed to keep the peace with good administration. Tensions, however, between the colonial powers could not always be avoided. In 1898, at Fashoda, in the upper valley of the Nile, the French and British seemed to be on the verge of war. France had asked Captain Marchand to create a junction between Dakar and Djibouti. For its part, Britain was dreaming of an African empire from the Cape to Cairo. These 2 imperial axes crossed in the region of the present-day Sudan, whose status was still ill-defined. The diplomats eventually avoided conflict, and in 1899, an agreement was made which delimited the border between French Chad and the British Sudan. In exchange, France had a free hand in Morocco. The same year, 1899, war broke out in South Africa between the British and the Boers, the Dutch settlers who arrived in the 17th century. This violent conflict opposed 2 armies of whites on African territory. It heralded the wars of the 20th century with regard to the power of modern weapons and the violence used against the civilian population, since the British confined the Boers in internment camps. War was barely avoided between France and Germany over Morocco, where on 2 occasions, 1905 and 1911, Kaiser Wilhelm II tried to contest France's preeminence. Each time, Britain sided with France, which in 1912 obtained recognition of its protectorate over Morocco, but in exchange for territorial concessions in equatorial Africa in favor of Germany. These colonial rivalries were not the cause of the First World War. However, they helped to exacerbate nationalist feelings. As for the colonial armies with their African troops, they would play an important part in the Great War.